I welcome you all for this webinar on intracardiac masses, a case-based presentation. I welcome our current president, Dr. Soumitra Kumar, the president-elect, Dr. Raghu, our honorary secretary, Dr. Manish Bansal, and all the present and past presidents of Indian Academy of Cardiography, the members. I welcome you all for this interesting webinar on intracardiac masses. I am Dr. Alagasan, the moderator, and the speaker today is Dr. Manjuran, whom all of you know. Dr. Manjuran, Rajan Joseph Manjuran, is professor of cardiology who retired from the Kottayam Medical College, and now he is working as emeritus professor of cardiology at Pushpagiri Medical College, Trivalla, Kerala. He won the Best Doctor Award from the government of Kerala in 1997. And past president of the Indian Academy of Cardiography in 2011 and 12. He has got a lot of publications to his name in the international and national journal, and he is an invited speaker, and he has given a lot of talks in the national and international fora. And he was the leader of the Indian delegation for the first Echocardiography Society's World Summit at Buenos Aires, Argentina in 2011. And today's topic is cardiac masses. All of you know the cardiac masses consist of tumors, vegetation, and pseudotumors and artifacts. These have to be identified by using echocardiography. So the most important investigation, echocardiography, is a class 1 indication whenever you suspect these type of intracardiac masses. You can use the transthoracic echocardiography, transesophageal echocardiography, three-dimensional echocardiography, and contrast echocardiography. And also sometimes we have to use the other imaging modalities to come to a definite conclusion. To deal on this topic, I invite Dr. Manjuran. Before that, please mute your phone and keep it in vibrator mode. If the video is not running properly, you are not able to see the video properly, turn off your camera. This will save some bandwidth and you will be able to clearly see the videos. And all of you can post your questions in the chat box, which we'll try to answer after the webinar is given by Dr. Manjuran. Over to you, sir. Yes, slide is seen. You can go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. First of all, let me thank the office bearers of the Indian Academy of Echocardiography, the President Soumitra Kumar, Secretary Manish Bansal, President-elect Dr. Raghu, and other senior members of the Indian Academy of Echocardiography for giving me an opportunity to talk to you today. I also thank Professor Alagasan, who is moderating today's session, for his kind words. And also, I thank all the senior colleagues, especially past presidents who are present in this presentation for this opportunity. The topic that I am addressing today is the intracardiac masses. Echocardiography is probably the most widely used investigation to detect intracardiac masses. When we look at the intracardiac masses mass is an abnormal structure within the heart. The intracardiac masses consist of tumor, thrombus, vegetation, granuloma, prosthetic material. Some of the normal cardiac structures can mimic a mass, and ultrasound artifacts. Let us look at the tumors, primary tumors. Primary tumors of the heart are much less common compared to secondary tumors. When you look at the benign primary tumors, the commonest is myxoma, which is almost 1/3 of all the benign tumors of the heart are myxomas. And the commonest site for a myxoma is left atrium. Other benign tumors are lipoma, papillary fibroelastoma, hemangioma, rhabdomyoma, mesothelioma of the AV node. Let us look at left atrial myxoma. It's a commonest benign tumor. Left atrium is the commonest site for left atrial myxoma. Okay, so left atrial myxomas, there are a few features of the left atrial myxoma. You can see areas of calcification. You can see sometimes areas of liquefaction. And very often it is irregular in shape. So it is described that it is like a grape bunch. So left atrial myxoma has certain features, and also it is pedunculated and is most often attached to the intra-atrial septum. Classically, it is attached to the fossa ovalis of the intra-atrial septum. This is another example of a left atrial myxoma. They come in different shapes and sizes, but one characteristic feature is always most often it is attached to the intra-atrial septum. Sometimes in patients who are obese, the transthoracic echo may not easily pick up a left atrial myxoma. Here you can see a vague shadow in the left atrium, but when you do a transesophageal echo, the mass becomes very clear. So in all suspected cases of left atrial myxoma, if it is not well delineated by a transthoracic echo, transesophageal echo can easily bring out the structures in the left atrium, including left atrial myxoma. Sometimes myxoma may be attached not to the intra-atrial septum, but it can be attached to somewhere else. Here is an example of a myxoma which is attached to the anterior mitral leaflet. You can see this is a myxoma which has been operated and is attached to the anterior mitral leaflet. Rare, but occasionally it can be attached to other structures also. An example of right atrial myxoma. After the left atrium, right atrium is the next common site for myxomas. Here is an example of a right atrial myxoma, which also is pedunculated, freely mobile, and it's attached to the intra-atrial septum. The myxomas are the commonest primary cardiac tumor. Commonest site is left atrium. Other sites include right atrium, left ventricle, and right ventricle. Most often it is single, 5% can be multiple. There is always a risk that if the left atrium, the myxoma is not completely removed, there is a possibility of recurrence. It has an irregular shape. It is described as grape cluster, non-homogeneous. There can be areas of calcification, areas of liquefaction, pedunculated, and is freely mobile. So by looking at all these characteristic features, left atrial myxoma can be easily identified. Papillary fibroelastoma, mostly attached to the valve. It is very often similar to a vegetation. The difference is that vegetation is seen on the upstream of the valve. For example, if it is seen in the mitral valve, vegetation is seen on the atrial side. And if the vegetation is on the aortic valve, it is on the ventricular side. But when it comes to the papillary fibroelastoma, it is other way around. On the mitral valve, it is seen on the ventricular side, and on the aortic valve, it is usually seen on the aortic side. Here is an example of a papillary fibroelastoma, which is attached to the chordae. Here is another example of a papillary fibroelastoma, which is attached to the, you can see the pedicle, which is getting attached to the root of the aortic valve. So this is another example of a papillary fibroelastoma. Another interesting case of fibroelastoma, very interesting, that this is a proved case, surgically removed, and is proved case of fibroelastoma, but it is cystic. There is some cystic process taking place in the fibroelastoma, very rare. So this is proved by the cardiac MRI. You can see the papillary fibroelastoma. This was surgically removed. So papillary fibroelastomas are seen in relation to valves. They are most often seen in relation to mitral valve. It may simulate a vegetation. Unlike infective endocarditis vegetation, papillary fibroelastoma is seen on the downstream side of the valve. Mostly it is asymptomatic. Rarely, superimposed thrombus formation can result in embolization. If the patient is having no symptoms, I think he can be left alone. But if the patient has got embolization, either it should be removed or the patient should be on oral anticoagulants. Lipoma or the RV outflow. RV outflow lipomas are uncommon. But here is a case of an RV outflow lipoma, which has been surgically removed and was found to be a lipoma. It has got a pedicle also. Lipomas usually do not have a pedicle. Here, this lipoma has got a pedicle also. There is another example of a large intracardiac lipoma. It is 36 years old lady, came with vague history of palpitations, not suggestive of tachyarrhythmia, no other complaints. Clinically, there was nothing abnormal detected. ECG, X-ray chest normal, diagnosed as anxiety state. Echocardiogram revealed a large mass sitting inside the right atrium. And it was removed and was found to be a lipoma. How to when you see a mass, how to think of, like, there are few masses which can confuse you in the right atrium.
Hello, sir. One minute, can I interrupt you, sir?
Yeah.
Can you use your pointer to point out the structures?
Yeah. Okay.
Get the pointers. That is the pointer.
Okay, I will do. Okay, so the right atrial masses can be normal, a large eustachian valve, pacemaker wires, sometimes central line catheters. Cysts can be there, thrombus, tumors, giant endothelial septal aneurysm. All these can sometimes create problems, out of which the most relevant are thrombus and tumors. Here is a lipoma in the right atrium. Lipomas can occur in any cardiac chamber. They are homogeneous, highly echogenic, and refractory. Unlike myxomas, which have areas of calcification, liquefaction, and these lipomas are highly echogenic and refractory. Another tumor which occurs mostly in newborns are rhabdomyomas. Here is an example of a rhabdomyoma in a newborn child. Multiple rhabdomyomas are seen, and this child was having breathlessness, but there was no obstruction to the great vessels, no arrhythmias, Hence, the child was kept on follow-up, and over a period of time, it regressed. Another example of a rhabdomyoma, multiple rhabdomyomas. Most often they are multiple. The plus point or the consoling point of the rhabdomyoma is that most often it regresses by itself. Unless there is a outflow obstruction or the patient is having dangerous arrhythmias, it is better to keep the patient under follow-up, and it most often spontaneously regresses. Mostly seen in newborn. There are multiple usually. Mostly there is spontaneous regression. Treatment is needed if there is outflow obstruction or malignant arrhythmias. Otherwise, it can be left alone. The malignant tumors of the heart are angiosarcoma, rhabdomyosarcoma, mesothelioma, fibrosarcoma, malignant lymphoma. There can be pericardial cysts, bronchogenic cysts, or blood cysts. They are primary tumors, malignant tumors. RV sarcoma. This is an example of a case of RV sarcoma, biopsy proved. Most often, whenever you find an RV outflow tumor, they are malignant. And sarcoma is the commonest RV outflow tumor. Here is an example of a large sarcoma, which is eroding almost the whole of and filling almost the whole of the right ventricle. The patient is having some degree of pleural pericardial effusion also. You can see the whole mass is filling the right ventricle. So this is a case of RV outflow sarcoma. Another case, a 30-year-old male came with exertional breathlessness 3 months. There was an ejection systolic murmur in the third and the second right intercostal space. Echocardiogram revealed a large mass sitting in the RV outflow region. The patient was not willing for any investigations and he died within 3 months. So most likely it must be a malignant tumor which eroded into neighboring structures and ultimately resulted in a fatal outcome. There is another interesting case of a 12-year-old boy presented to the pediatrics OPD with ecchymosis. He was detected to have disseminated intravascular coagulopathy. At that time, no cause for disseminated intravascular coagulopathy was detected. He was given standard treatment. His coagulation parameters became normal. 6 months later, the patient presented with exertional breathlessness and was detected to have an ejection systolic murmur in the pulmonary area. At that time, he was referred to the cardiology department for an echo evaluation. He had a prolonged APTT and echocardiogram revealed RV outflow tumors. RV outflow tumor. It is a pedungulated tumor. You can see two pedicles attaching it to the cardiac structure. It is a pedungulated large tumor which was sitting on the RV outflow and partly falling into the pulmonary artery. There was significant RV outflow obstruction with a gradient of about 50-55 millimeters of mercury. It was surgically removed, and this was the mass which was removed. And histopathological examination revealed that this is a cellular spindle cell neoplasm. It was consistent with smooth muscle differentiation. And final conclusion was it was a low-grade leiomyosarcoma. Intracardiac leiomyomas are virtually unheard of. I try to look at the literature. Leiomyosarcomas are extremely rare. The RV outflow tumors, most common is a sarcoma. Following surgery, all the coagulant parameters became normal. He is under follow-up for the past 10 years. Patient is doing well with no recurrence of tumor or coagulopathy. Myxosarcoma is another tumor that we have found in the RV outflow region. It is an example of a tumor mass in the RV outflow. It's falling into the pulmonary artery. It has got areas of liquefaction, a large mass, and it was biopsy proved and was diagnosed as a case of myxosarcoma. RV outflow tumors are usually rare. Statistically, intracavitary RV outflow tumors are almost 100 times more likely to be malignant than benign. That's the most important point, that RV outflow tumors are most likely malignant than they are benign. If it is a primary cardiac tumor, it is approximately 2 times more likely to be sarcoma than a myxoma. Myxoma is not a common tumor at the RV outflow region. Sarcoma is the commonest, and most important point that the most of the RV outflow tumors are malignant. Pericardial sarcoma is the case of a 26-year-old male, no significant past illness. He came with shortness of breath. He was admitted to a nursing home, felt better with some symptomatic treatment. On 28th June, he got discharged 2016. A week later, he stopped all medication, started getting fever, and was readmitted with significant dyspnea and atypical chest pain. X-ray chest showed cardiomegaly, and echocardiogram revealed a large mass which has got areas of cystic necrosis in the pericardium pressing on the heart. You can see the large mass with areas of necrosis pressing on the cardiac structure. It's a huge mass. Actually, it is so huge that it is actually significantly compressing the cardiac structure. RV outflow, then the mass is sitting here, mostly on the right side of the heart. Electrocardiogram, low voltage complexes. This is a large spherical circumscribed cystic mass. Mostly there are areas of cystic necrosis. Histopathology revealed spindle cell sarcoma. The spindle cell sarcoma is a very rare and very malignant tumor. The sarcomas can be angiosarcoma, synovial, fibrosarcoma, liposarcoma, rhabdomyosarcoma, or undifferentiated. This is a rare tumor, spindle cell sarcoma, and is highly malignant. What are the treatment options? Give chemotherapy or radiation to reduce the size of the tumor mass and then do a complete resection. However, the patient died before he could be intervened. Pericardial tumors are extremely rare. Malignant tumors, very rare, autopsy proved. Metastatic is the most common pericardial tumor. They present with massive pericardial effusion, and sometimes they present with cardiac tamponade. Secondary tumors, they are 20 times more common than primary cardiac tumors. Most common sites from which the secondaries arise are lung, lymphoma, breast, leukemia, stomach, melanoma, liver, and colon, in that order. The patients can present as cardiac tamponade due to pericardial involvement and rapid pericardial effusion. Myocardial involvement is less common compared to pericardial involvement. Renal cell carcinoma can spread through the IVC directly to the right atrium. Now let us look at another aspect of intracardiac mass, thrombus. A mass can be diagnosed as a thrombus in the following situations. One, in the presence of a predisposing factors like stagnation of blood, as can occur in left atrium in mitral stenosis, in right atrium in RRV endomyocardial fibrosis, in patients with atrial fibrillation, especially in the left atrium, at LV apex associated with akinesia or dyskinesia. It can occur, a thrombus can be suspected if there is a spontaneous echo contrast. There are certain sites where thrombus formation is most frequent, like left atrial appendage, sites where the pulmonary veins open, apex of the left ventricle, patent foramen vein, mechanoprostatic valve, and sometimes a thrombus can extend through the IVC into the right atrium. Most of the thrombi are not pedangulated. They are mostly fixed. If there is a history of embolic episode, that gives strength that most likely the mass is a thrombus. The thrombus is rare at the site of a normal valve. That is because at the valve site, there is a regular flow of blood, and it is unlikely that a thrombus can be formed at the valve, normal valve. Let us look at some of the examples. A massive left atrial thrombus. It is the story of a 62-year-old female, non-patient of rheumatic heart disease with intermittent atrial fibrillation on oral anticoagulants, irregular follow-up and medications. She was admitted with acute brain infarct and MRI brain towards embolic infarct. Echo done to look for cardiac source of emboli. It revealed a large left atrial thrombus, a fixed thrombus actually, a very huge one, very huge left atrial thrombus. The patient was started on parenteral anticoagulation. Emergency cardiothoracic consultation was taken and was advised early surgery for thrombus removal and mitral valve replacement. The patient underwent surgery. The thrombus was removed. It revealed an ulcerated lesion of the left atrial endocardium, just above the annulus at 3 o'clock position. The thrombus was so huge that it was almost filling the whole of the left atrium. The ulcer in the left atrium was debrided. Mitral valve replacement was done. This is the echo of the same patient. After mitral valve replacement, the left atrium is free of thrombus. And the histopathological examination of the denuded ulcer did not reveal any malignant process. This was a case of ball valve thrombus. Due to some reason, it's not moving. Okay, let me see whether it moves. Okay, now it started moving. This is a slide which was given to me by Professor Allegation. This is a patient with mitral stenosis with ball valve thrombus. Multiple ball valve thrombi are seen. This is something which is very serious situation. The patient can at any time dislodge a embolus and go to the systemic side, can result in a stroke or maybe an occlusion at another site. So the multiple ball valve thrombus is one complication which can happen in patients with mitral stenosis. Nowadays, it is not seen. That is because the aggressive anticoagulation of patients with atrial fibrillation is really bringing down this type of ball valve thrombus. Left atrial appendage is a very common site for thrombus formation. Here, to visualize the left atrial appendage, the best view is transesophageal echo. Here is an example of a patient who is having intermittent atrial fibrillation, and you can see a left atrial thrombus in the left atrial appendage. So the left atrial appendage thrombus is best visualized by doing a transesophageal echo. However, sometimes you may be able to detect a left atrial thrombus by a transthoracic echo also. Here is an example of a patient in whom left atrial thrombus was detected from the transthoracic echo. You can see there's a thrombus sitting in the left atrial appendage. By doing a short axis view and tilting the transducer downwards and laterally, you will be able to pick up the left atrial appendage. The short axis view at the level of the aortic valve. And in some, especially in mitral stenosis, where the left atrial appendage is dilated, it may be possible to pick up a left atrial appendage. But it is very extremely difficult in a normal person where the left atrial appendage is not dilated. Here's an example of another case of left atrial appendage thrombus. You can see the transesophageal echo. You can also see that is evidence of spontaneous echo contrast. Another site for thrombus formation is the right atrium. Here is the story of a 60-year-old female patient with a right ventricular endomyocardial fibrosis on follow-up. An echo revealed a large mass in the right atrium, almost filling the whole of the right atrium. The inferior vena cava was free of thrombus. The transesophageal echo was from the subxiphoid view, thrombus sitting in the right atrium. Transesophageal echo also revealed large thrombus. The 3D echo, you can see the thrombus in the right atrium. We did a cardiac MRI, which showed the filling defect, which represents the thrombus, and also the apex of the RV is completely obliterated. So you can see the thrombus and apical obliteration of the RV. Here is the large thrombus in the right atrium in cardiac MRI. LV thrombus mostly occurs following myocardial infarction, or sometimes it can happen in patients with dilated cardiomyopathy with very low ejection fraction. Thrombus usually occurs at areas where there is mostly at apex, where there is hypokinesia or akinesia. You can see a thrombus at the apex in these two cases. Sometimes, if you are in doubt whether the structure that you are seeing is actually only a myocardium or the thrombus, you can depend on a contrast echo. Here is an example where we have done a contrast echo in a patient where there is a LV apical thrombus, and you can see a very significant filling defect. You can see a filling defect confirming that it is a apical thrombus. There is another example where we had a doubt whether there is really a thrombus or not. We had a doubt whether there is a thrombus sitting here or maybe a thrombus at the apex. So we did a contrast echo and there was a small filling defect. So we confirmed that there is a small thrombus. Patient was put on oral anticoagulants, and when the echo was repeated later, the defect had completely disappeared. So contrast echo is useful in confirming a thrombus, or if you are in doubt, to delineate especially a small thrombus. Now let us look at vegetations. Vegetations are the pathognomonic of infective endocarditis. Vegetations are usually detected on the downstream of the valve. When it occurs in the mitral valve, it is detected on the left atrial side, and when it occurs on the aortic valve, it is detected on the LV side of the aortic valve. One important point about prosthetic valves: the prosthetic valves, the vegetations very often is missed in a transthoracic echo. Here is an example of a patient who is suspected to have infective endocarditis, who had a previous prosthetic valve replacement. The transthoracic echo did not show any vegetations, but when you look at the transesophageal echo, the vegetation is easily picked up. That is because the prosthetic valve interferes with the assessment of the valve at the left atrial side. So you have to look at the valve from the left atrial side to detect the vegetations. Here is an example where the transthoracic echo did not pick up the vegetations, and transesophageal echo very easily picked up the vegetations, and the diagnosis was confirmed. Sometimes the vegetations are very large, and it may be elongated vegetations. And here is an example of a patient with the vegetation in the chordae and at the junction of the chordae with the capillary muscle in a case of aortic regurgitation. It is a very huge vegetation. Whenever the vegetation is large, especially rounded and large, fungal etiology must be always thought of. This patient did not have a fungal vegetation, but whenever there is a large vegetation, you must suspect the possibility of a fungal etiology. Here is an example of a patient who had a pacemaker implanted, and he developed an infective endocarditis of the tricuspid valve. He had mild tricuspid regurgitation, and he developed a infective endocarditis of the tricuspid valve. Here is an example of a patient with a large vegetation in a patient with ventricular septal defect. You can see the vegetation at the RV outflow, and it is falling into the pulmonary artery and back into the RV outflow. So it is a huge vegetation, elongated vegetation, so extending from the RV outflow to the pulmonary artery in a patient with ventricular septal defect. The vegetations are mostly attached to valves or sites of abnormal jets. It varies in size and shape. Size mostly varies from 2 millimeters to 15 millimeters. Rarely it can be as long as 30 millimeters. When the vegetations are large in size, two things should be thought of. One, it could be a fungal vegetation. Any vegetation which is more than 10 millimeters, or especially if it is 15 millimeters or more, they are at high risk of developing thromboembolic episodes. So the size of the vegetation has got prognostic value. The vegetations have independent mobility. It is mostly associated with high velocity jet lesions like mitral regurgitation, aortic regurgitation, aortic stenosis, ventricular septal defect, tetralogy of Fallot, or pulmonary stenosis. It is to be differentiated from Lamb excrescens. These Lambley excrescens are minor projections from the closure line of the aortic valve towards the left ventricle. They usually are seen in elderly people and is a normal structure. It indicates some degenerative process and does not indicate any pathology. A large number of structures inside the heart can mimic a cardiac mass. Large number of them in the left atrium, right atrium, everywhere. Some of the important ones I have highlighted. In the right atrium, crista terminalis. Chiari network or Eustachian valve remnants. Pacer wire, Swan-Ganz catheter, central venous line, or any prosthetic material in the right atrium can be mistaken for a mass. In the left ventricle, sometimes there can be aberrant chordae. A large papillary muscle sometimes may be mistaken for a vegetation or a mass. In the right ventricle, large moderator band. In the aortic valve, nodule of Arrhenius and Lambel excrescence also are structures which may be mistaken for a cardiac mass. The myxomatous mitral valve sometimes may be mistaken for a vegetation. And nowadays, there is the leadless pacemakers which are implanted in the right ventricle, and that may also be mistaken for a cardiac mass. So there are a number of structures, normal structures, which may be mistaken for a cardiac mass. Let us look at few of them. Crista terminalis is one structure which can be mistaken for a right atrial tumor. A 38-year-old female came from preoperative cardiac checkup. No cardiac complaints. On examination, no cardiac abnormalities were detected. ECG exercise chest within normal limits. An echocardiogram was done, which revealed here was a mass seen, which was actually movable, and everybody thought that this may be a right atrial tumor. And then we did a cardiac MRI, and it proved to be a hypertrophied crista terminalis. That is very beautifully seen. I'm not able to show that. Okay, then let me go to the next one. Another structure which may be mistaken for a mass in the right atrium is the Eustachian valve. It is a remnant of the original valve, which actually redirects blood from the inferior vena cava towards the foramen vein. You can see this is the Eustachian valve is seen in the right atrium. So this is something which can be mistaken for an intracardiac mass. And there is a false tendon in the left ventricle. Here is an example of a 66-year-old male, non-cardiac chest pain for 6 months, exertional breathlessness for 6 months. There is a fourth heart sound, ECG non-specific STT changes. And here is a calcified structure, which is thought to be a calcified false tendon. And there was no obstruction to flow here, and it was thought to be a calcified false tendon. Sometimes the chordae can be elongated and loose, and sometimes it may mimic an intracardiac structure, intracardiac mass. Here is an example of a patient with a very loose and large chordae. He was asymptomatic. It was accidentally picked up, and there were no symptoms on follow. Pacemaker wires sometimes may create problems. It may mimic a thrombus, and unless you are aware that this can be a pacemaker wire, sometimes a wrong diagnosis can be made. But pacemaker wires, you should be careful that it can lead to infective endocarditis of the tricuspid valve. That should be looked into. But whenever you see a pacemaker wire, study it properly and then only draw conclusions. So pacemaker wire in the right atrium is something which you should always assess properly before you draw conclusions. Some miscellaneous cases, ruptured false tendon. Here is an example of a gentleman who came to us on December 9, 2015. And at that time, we detected a false tendon in him. 6 months later, he came with a non-cardiac chest pain, but it was an acute pain. And when we did an echocardiogram, we found that the false tendon that he had previously had broken. So we can see a false tendon which is actually moving around inside the left ventricle, and which was there previously. We could diagnose it because we had done a previous echo 6 months ago, and then the left the false tendon which was there previously has broken. Intra-atrial septal aneurysm, usually seen in children. This is a newborn, I think about a week. You can see a intra-atrial septal aneurysm. Sometimes this may be mistaken for a abnormal cardiac mass, and intra-atrial septal aneurysm is something you should keep in mind, especially when you are doing a newborn echocardiogram. Here is an example of a very interesting case. Patient presented with exertional breathlessness, and there was a large mass projecting into the right atrium and into the left atrium. We did a transesophageal echo, and we found that it is closely associated with aorta. And we thought it may be and inside the mass, there are areas of breaking down, liquefaction. So we thought of a possibility that this could be a aneurysm of the sinus of Valsalva, left aneurysm of the left sinus of Valsalva with thrombus formation and liquefaction. We confirmed the diagnosis by cardiac MRI, and the patient was operated. And it was a case of thrombosed, unruptured left sinus of Valsalva aneurysm. An example of a mass which is attached to the tricuspid valve is the story of a 45-year-old female, complains of progressive exertional breathlessness for 6 months, diabetic and hypertensive on treatment. On examination, patient was anemic, non-febrile. There was a fourth heart sound, early systolic murmur in the tricuspid area. ECG, XHS both were within normal limits, blood pressure negative. Echocardiogram revealed a mass in the tricuspid valve. And it's a really mass partly projecting into the right atrium and partly into the right ventricle. The patient is non-febrile, but the patient did not want treatment in our center because of the financial reasons. The patient got discharged. I followed up the patient, and the patient went to a nearby government hospital where she was investigated, and after 9 days, patient was discharged home. And at the moment, it is about 6 months ago, the patient is doing well and has improved. I am at a loss to know what exactly is the cause of the mass in the in the tricuspid valve. It's unlikely to be an infective endocarditis vegetation because the patient without treatment improved. We want to follow up the patient and try to find out whether it is a tumor mass or what exactly has happened to that mass. So friends, what is the take-home message? Intracardiac masses can be tumors, thrombus, vegetations, cysts, or rarely granuloma. Many times intracardiac masses are accidentally detected. on a routine echo examination. There are a number of normal structures which can mimic intracardiac masses. They should be promptly differentiated from pathological masses. Metastatic tumors are 20 times more common than primary tumors of the heart. Pericardial metastasis can cause cardiac tamponade because of the rapid pericardial effusion. RV outflow tumors are most likely malignant. The chance of a RV outflow tumor being malignant is almost 100-fold compared to a benign nature. Tumors can be differentiated from thrombus with careful imaging and analysis. You must always think of the possibility of a thrombus in certain situations like stagnation of blood or certain sites like left atrial appendage, patent foramen ovale, akinetic apex of the left ventricle, or in patients with the spontaneous echo contrast. Tumors can be differentiated from thrombus with careful imaging and analysis. In doubtful scenario, multimodality imaging is required. Cardiac MRI, sometimes even PET. I thank the following colleagues who helped me with interesting echo images for today's presentation. Dr. S.K. Parashar, Professor Alagation, Professor Krishnamurthy, and Dr. Joni Joseph. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Let me see whether I can show you the one which with the hypertrophied crista terminalis.
Crista terminalis, okay.
Let me see. I'll just share this. I will go off sharing and then I will share again. Oh, yeah. So here is an example where you could pick up a small mass projecting into the right atrium. So we had a doubt whether this could be a tumor mass. Since the patient was absolutely asymptomatic, and we thought there is a possibility of a usage in, crista terminalis, hypertrophied crista terminalis, we thought we should do a cardiac MRI. Cardiac MRI was done. Which revealed that you can see the mass here. You can clearly see the mass here. So when I am using this this, okay, now you can see that you see this in the MRI in the cardiac MRI, you can see the hypertrophied crista terminalis. So we concluded that it is a hypertrophied crista terminalis, and we sent the patient for surgery, and the patient did extremely well. So sometimes in doubtful situations where a multimodality imaging, like cardiac MRI, can come to the rescue. And cardiac MRI has got the special advantage that even tissue characterization is possible. Here is an example where a suspected case of a mass, which may be a cardiac tumor, was found to be a normal structure, a hypertrophied crista terminalis. Okay, I think that's enough. I think I have finished.
Thank you, sir, for the excellent presentation. You have shown typical cases of the commonest primary tumor which we see, especially the myxomas, and the commonest tumor which we see in children, rhabdomyoma, and also other examples of papillary fibroelastoma, lipoma, etc., and primary malignant tumors like sarcomas, which are present inside the ventricles, and also you have shown a case of pericardial sarcoma, and the other types of masses like thrombus present inside the left ventricle, right ventricle, the left atrium. There you have shown examples of the masses inside the, thrombus present inside the cardiac chambers. Lastly, the say most important one, vegetations. The diagnosis of infective endocarditis is mostly dependent upon the presence or absence of vegetation and the complications due to the vegetation. We have also shown cases of vegetations over the mitral valve, aortic valve, inside the right ventricle, etc. So we have a few questions, and we'll try to take up one by one. The first question is, can we use an ICD for ventricular arrhythmias? He has posted. Most probably it is a ventricular arrhythmias. So I take it for granted that it is a case of probably for rhabdomyosarcoma with ventricular arrhythmias or ventricular arrhythmias due to infarction. Can we use the ICD in the presence of the masses?
See, actually, the thrombus is not a contraindication for ICD implantation, because most of the times when the usually ICD implantation is done, especially in an anterior myocardial infarction, only after 6 weeks. By that time, the thrombus might have regressed or got organized and is unlikely to give rise to any embolic episodes. The worry is that when the shock is given, whether there can be an embolic episode. The shock can be given even in patients with a thrombus in the ICU if there is a reason to give a shock. So in a patient post myocardial infarction, which is more than 6 weeks, where the LV apical thrombus is well organized and ICD implantation, if indicated, is not contraindicated.
Another question is, can the I don't know which case he is referring to, can these be eosinophilic infiltrates in fibroelastosis? I don't know which case he is referring to that.
Is he referring to the patient with right atrial thrombus when a patient with endomyocardial fibrosis?
Maybe.
But then see, the eosinophilic granulomas is actually thought to have some relationship with the endomyocardial fibrosis, but the classical picture of a RV apical obliteration with RV outflow dilatation is the most characteristic of RV endomyocardial fibrosis, and most of these patients are died down cases with no active inflammatory process.
That's correct. See, actually, the eosinophilic endocarditis, otherwise called Loeffler's endocarditis, is usually associated with eosinophilia. So if you do a blood test, usually you must be able to differentiate it from the, from the endomyocardial fibrosis. Sometimes in eosinophilic endocarditis, the right ventricular outflow tract is involved. If there is a right ventricular outflow tract involvement, definitely it is a eosinophilic endocarditis or Loeffler's endocarditis. Whereas the RV outflow is normal in patients with endomyocardial fibrosis.
Now, also, the RV outflow can be dilated in patients with endomyocardial fibrosis, yes, because of the apical obliteration.
Yes.
Very often, RV eosinophilic endocarditis or Loeffler syndrome is quite uncommon. Usually, they are either a combined LV involvement also. Most of the times, there will be some degree of LV involvement also in these patients.
Yes, both the LV can be involved, RV can be involved, or both the ventricles can be involved in endomyocardial fibrosis, also Loeffler's endocarditis. Another question is, can we find calcified false tendons in newborn? And what is the significance?
And I do not know. I have never seen one. I have never seen a false tendon in a newborn. I have seen only in adults. I do not know whether a false tendon can get calcified in a newborn, unless you are thinking of some calcium metabolism problem. Like I do not know whether if there is a calcium metabolism abnormality, whether the false tendon can be calcified.
The most common tumor which we see in the newborn, or even before the child is born, is a rhabdomyoma. So the commonest tumor, whenever you see a child below the age of 1 year with masses inside the atrium or ventricles, the first diagnosis will be rhabdomyoma. The second most common tumor in children is fibroma. fibroma is usually attached to the muscles of the left ventricle or the right ventricle. And fibroma is one tumor which can again be associated with cardiac arrhythmias. So for rhabdomyoma is the most common tumor, especially in utero, and also when the child is born and within, say, the age of 1 year. And the children with rhabdomyoma, you have to always look for tuberous sclerosis, signs of tuberous sclerosis, and vice versa. If the child has got tuberous sclerosis, you always look for a rhabdomyoma in the echocardiogram. The next question is the same one. And, how do we describe any mass from echocardiography? It says this is actually a general thing. How will you report if you see a mass? How will you report, and how will you draw the conclusions, and how will you how will you present it in the echocardiographic report?
The three most important intracardiac masses are either it is a tumor, or a thrombus, or a vegetation. These are the three most important intracardiac masses. The differentiation between thrombus and tumor sometimes is a challenging proposition. But there are many points which will help us to diagnose a thrombus, which I have already mentioned. You can look at whether the patient is having a predisposing situation for the development of a thrombus. In the left atrium, in a patient with mitral stenosis, or a patient is in atrial fibrillation, there is or if you are seeing spontaneous echo contrast in the left atrium, that patient is a high-risk candidate for thrombus formation. In the left ventricle, if there is a significant LV dysfunction, especially ejection fraction is less than 20%, and also if there is regional wall motion abnormality, where the apex is akinetic or even dyskinetic, and these patients can have a thrombus formation. Then there are certain sites where a high risk of thrombus formation, which include left atrial appendage, patent foramen ovale, the site where the pulmonary veins drain. These are common sites for a thrombus formation. But at the same time, thrombus is rare at the regions of the valves, normal valves, where there is a normal blood flow. Then thrombus is very often less pedangulated. If there is a pedangulated mass, then you have to suspect that it may not be a thrombus, it may be a tumor. Especially myxomas are pedangulated. So in a pedangulated mass, I always think of the possibility of myxoma. The site for myxoma is in the left atrium, and where it is attached to the left atrial endoatrial septum, and the classical site of attachment is at the region of the foramen ovale. So then the central clearing is one of the features of a thrombus. While areas of clearing, areas of liquefaction with areas of calcification is usually seen in a thrombus. And these are the multiple points by which you will be able to differ. And if there is an embolic episode, that will be more in favor of a clot. But we also know that the myxomas are known to give rise to embolic episodes. So that cannot be taken as an important point, but this can be an additional point where embolic episodes are more frequent in a thrombus. So you look at the whole scenario and draw a conclusion. Majority of the times it is easy to differentiate. But if there is a real difficulty in differentiating, then you have to depend upon other imaging modalities, especially cardiac MRI, where the thrombus can be easily differentiated. Another point for differentiation is that the vegetations can be sometimes or rather papillary fibroelastoma has to be differentiated from a vegetation. The one important differentiating point is that the vegetations are seen on the downstream of the valve. That is, in a mitral valve, it is seen on the left atrial side, and on the aortic valve, it is seen on the left ventricular side. But the fibroelastoma, papillary fibroelastoma, is usually seen on the downstream side. That means, sorry, upstream side. That is on the LV side of the mitral valve and on the aortic side of the aortic valve. So by these methods also, you will be able to differentiate the the papillary fibroelastoma from vegetation. Sometimes there can be a real difficulty, especially in a patient who has thrown an embolus and is also running fever. Sometimes you may have a difficulty. But then you can look at the other clinical parameters like ESR and other parameters to differentiate a vegetation from a papillary fibroelastoma.
So the main thing is, if whenever you see a mass, to differentiate it between tumor, thrombus, and vegetation, we have to look at the history, the associated clinical findings, the associated echocardiographic findings, and then come to a conclusion. So without that, it is going to be very difficult to be sure whether a mass is a thrombus, tumor, or vegetation. So you have to go step by step and then try to arrive at the diagnosis. If you are still not able to differentiate other types of echocardiography, if the mass, if you are not able to delineate where it is attached, how many masses are present, what is the characteristic, if you are not able to clearly see the echocardiographically the masses, you can do a transesophageal echocardiogram. This is especially useful in patients with prosthetic valve thrombus, or prosthetic valve endocarditis, to look at the left atrial side of the mitral valve processes and the aortic side of the aortic valve processes. Whereas by transthoracic echo, we can look at the left ventricular side and the left ventricular outflow tract side of the prosthetic valve. So if you combine transthoracic and transesophageal, we will be able to clearly delineate any mass present over the prosthetic valves. So transesophageal echocardiography should be done in suspected cases of masses to find out the nature of the mass, the complications due to the mass, etc. At least one, say, transesophageal echocardiogram in all the patients in whom we are not sure about the nature of the mass. There is another question. The crista terminalis, as actually there is a, what are the consequences of not operating? Crista terminalis is say physiological structure. So what is, you can tell them what is crista terminalis, whether you have to operate on the crista terminalis. That was a question.
It is a structure which is present in the right atrium, and by itself it is not it's not a pathology, but in some patients it may be hypertrophied, and rarely it may create a confusion for the diagnosis of an intracardiac mass, as I have shown. The tumor, the crista terminalis actually is picked up as a mass, and sometimes it may confuse with an right atrial mass, and it does not require any treatment at all, and nothing should be done.
Yes. Sometimes apart from the mass-like thing, even you can see a ridge-like shadow inside the right atrium. It actually separates the trabeculated portion of the right atrial appendage from the non-trabeculated portion. So that is a normal structure, and that should not be mistaken for a mass. That's the only thing. Sometimes it is very prominent. Very often we can see it, and in post-operative patient we may think it is something else, etc. So, and the other common normal structure which is present inside the right atrium, as you showed, the eustachian valve, the Thebesian valve, the Chiari network, etc. These structures can present, say, inside the right atrium as a mass, and it may be mistaken for a thrombus or tumors, etc. So we have to keep in mind the normal structures which can mimic the masses. These are all the questions which have been asked by the participants. If you want to give your concluding remarks, you can give it.
Yeah. See, the one important point about the intracardiac mass is that majority of the times intracardiac masses are picked up on a routine examination. So it is you should be carefully looking for it. And second, there are certain situations where you can suspect an intracardiac mass, especially if there is an embolic episode. We are especially a brain infarct. We always look for a source of embolus. And then you should be carefully looking for all the cardiac chambers, and even transthoracic echo alone is not enough. In all these patients, there is a need of a transesophageal echo because the common site for a thrombus formation in the left atrial appendage can be picked up only by a transthoracic echo. So a proper detailed examination by transesophageal, transthoracic as well as transesophageal echo are required in many situations in order to delineate the intracardiac mass, and also to differentiate the intracardiac mass between tumor, thrombus, and the vegetation. And with a proper clinical background, a proper thorough examination, echocardiography can almost always pick up and differentiate and the cause of the intracardiac mass. There are few situations where it may be difficult to differentiate by echocardiography alone. One situation is granuloma. Rarely a granuloma like tuberculoma can sometimes cause an intracardiac mass. And there has been a case reported from Hyderabad by Professor Krishnaraju, where intracardiac mass on the mitral leaflet was detected, and it was investigated by cardiac MRI, by PET, and finally there were plenty of tuberculous lymph nodes in different parts of the body, and a diagnosis of tuberculous granuloma was made. The patient was put on anti-tuberculous treatment, and the granuloma disappeared. So there can be rare situations, rare causes of a intracardiac mass, which sometimes may require more elaborate investigation to come to a proper diagnosis. So in those situations, sometimes the echocardiography alone may not be enough. But in majority, or I would say that almost 99% of situations, where combining 2D, 3D, and transesophageal echo, you will be able to detect, differentiate, and come to a proper conclusion. And that will help us to come to a diagnosis as well as to decide the management strategy.
Thank you very much, sir. I thank all the participants for their active participation. And we will meet again on October 11th in the next webinar. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alagashan, for moderating it so efficiently. And thank you for your comments also, and also for your help in preparing the manuscript. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.